Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. We're focused on talking to food and beverage brands that are on a mission to make the world better.
Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. I'm your host, Duncan Alney here, where we speak with leading entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders of mission-driven beverage and food brands. And today's episode is brought to you by Firebelly, which I founded. At Firebelly, we make brands more likable and profitable through social media marketing. We provide organic and paid social strategies along with influencer strategies to help you get ROI fast. We were voted one of top 10 social media agencies in the world by Clutch. Firebelly has helped clients like Netflix, Fiji Water, Qdoba, and many others transform their social media strategies. If you want to establish your brand, expand your reach, and get ROI today, let's talk. Go to firebellymarketing.com. and let's get it started. Today, I am so excited about our guest. Our guest is Daniel Kurzrock, who is the co-founder of ReGrained. ReGrained leverages technology and culinary science to transform beer waste into food. They call this edible upcycling. I was candidly so surprised to hear that only about 10% of the ingredients used to brew beer end up in your glass. I mean, that's phenomenal. Only 10%. The ReGrained takes the spent grain waste from your local brewery partners and they build recipes around it with other locally sourced ingredients to craft delicious, healthy, and inherently sustainable foods. And I was able to, my wife's great delight, get my hands on some Mexican street corn. So I am a hero at home. With no further ado, welcome, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Duncan. Great to be with you. Thanks for trying out our puff product, and looking forward to what we're going to get into from here.
I heard a rumor that it was not available for a minute, so I'm super happy. We love anything Mexican. So
that product has sold out a few times. I mean, so we're, as a company, like our main focus is on ingredients. We have some technology that we developed, as you mentioned at the top of the show, to take the basically byproducts from the brewing process and we're actually looking at other beverages and the byproducts that those create, and we use our process that we patented to actually create co-products, so to create new ingredients. And all of our ingredients are, very nutrient dense. They're very versatile in terms of like their application. They have some great flavor. And we work B2B with other companies to help them, create products using these ingredients. But we also do some of our own. And what you tried is one of our own branded products. It's a bagged snack. It's like a healthy take on a chip, kind of. The texture is kind of between like a Cheeto and a Sun Chip, right? And it's, it's good out of the bag. It's dippable. You can have it as a healthy crouton on a salad, even. That's a little pro tip, or maybe on a soup. And it's our way of like helping show people that upcycled food isn't just a great idea, but that they're great products, great tasting products that make supporting the mission that much easier, because you don't need to compromise on the actual product itself.
And before we talk about how it all started, because it's a fascinating story, let's just quickly define for the people listening, what is upcycling?
Yeah, really a pleasure. I've been defining upcycling now for about 10 years. So it's always a lot of fun. There's fortunately been a lot of increasing awareness, around it. And a lot of there's this Upcycled Food Association that we also co-founded. And there's now over 150 members for it. So upcycling 101, basically, to upcycle is to put something to higher value, as opposed to recycling, which would be to like turn it back into, itself, like a, metal can being turned back into another, aluminum can, right? I guess a downcycle would be just trash, right? Throwing something in the trash. So with upcycling, it's about taking something and creating a product of higher value. And this was a term that came into prominence through like cradle to cradle thinking, circular economy, methodology mostly for like hard goods, textiles, you see it in like fashion and construction. And when we were coming up with ReGrained, and we'll get into the origin in a bit, needed to come up with a new way to communicate what we were doing, which was taking food that was created as a co-product of another process and actually turning it into a new source of food, not turning it into like compost, which would be more what recycling looks like for food. So it's about there's actually a formal definition. If you go to upcycledfood.org, you can see the nonprofit and the formal definition for upcycled food. And it's about making sure that food goes to its best and highest use, feeding people. And that means diverting from lower uses like animal feed or anaerobic digestion or composting or worst case landfill. And it requires some education to teach people what upcycled food means, but it's really caught on. And in the last, even in the last year, we've seen huge gains in awareness about upcycled food. It got named as a top 10 trend by Whole Foods. There's really increasingly now when I'm, in front of we used to be able to be in front of a room, right? Hopefully it'll come back, at some point. But when, in conversations, even just saying, hey, have you heard of upcycle, the term upcycling before? The answer more and more is yes. And, that's, it's really exciting for us at ReGrained and, for the movement at large.
And how did this all start, Daniel? I know that there's a fascinating story here.
Well, a lot of good ideas start over a beer, right? And
Amen.
In my case, I was an undergrad. I was a student at UCLA. I learned how to brew beer with my college freshman year roommate. So we were, I guess reading between the lines there, we were underage at the time, and we learned that we could make our own beer. It's perfectly legal to go buy the ingredients to make beer.
I mean, creative problem solving.
Yeah, it's the one misconception maybe with home brewing is that you save money doing it. You definitely don't save money making your own beer, but it is a lot of fun. And like beer it's a pretty simple product. A lot of people don't think of beer as food or beer as an agricultural product, but it really is. Let's do maybe a quiz time, Duncan. There's 4 ingredients in beer. Do you know what they are?
Water.
Yeah. Actually, most people forget that one. So you're on point so far.
Water, hops, yeast.
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, and
what was the fourth one?
Well, that's the ReGrained one. The grain. So to make beer, the brewer, the first step is what they're doing is they're basically heating water and they're mixing it in with these with malt, malt is a sprouted grain. It's usually made from barley. So it's a sprouted ancient grain, actually, if you want to be trendy in how you describe it. And they make like a porridge, like an oatmeal. Not oatmeal because it's barley, not oats, but same idea. And then that water is no longer just water. It's actually like a sugary liquid known as wort, which is extracted from this mixture. It's drained basically. And that is the liquid that becomes beer. So it's boiled. They add the hops. Hops add flavor, and they also act as a preservative. And then later yeast is added, and that's where fermentation happens. Fermentation produces alcohol and gas, CO2. So you have a carbonated alcoholic beverage, beer, that we love. But way back in the very beginning of the process, you still have all this physical grain, and the amount of it, Duncan, is just astounding. It's 1 pound of grain for every 6-pack of beer. That's adds up to tens of billions of pounds annually in the U.S. alone. A single brewery in a single day, creates massive amounts of this food as a co-product of beer making. It's kind of like, for those who are familiar with cheese making and whey. Whey protein is made from the byproduct, that got turned into a co-product of cheese. And so, with beer and with brewers, you can't make beer without also creating what they call spent grain, brewers spent grain, which is a complete misnomer because really all that's happened with this grain is the sugars have been extracted from it. So as a food, it should be called Brewer's Super Grain, right? Which is why we called our ingredient Super Grain Plus, because it's actually a incredibly nutrient dense version of the grain because it's had its sugars extracted. So it's got loads of fiber, and fiber is a really critical nutrient for digestive health and all kinds of other reason to consume it. It's also got a lot of protein and some great flavor. So we came up with a way to turn it into, think of it like a flour, so we stabilize it. That's what our patent is around. And then we mill it to a powder that can be used in a huge range of applications. And our whole business so far has been around taking that kind of hero flagship ingredient and bringing it to market in some interesting ways, teaching people about, the wonders of the super grain that's created from the brewing process. And, it's got just enormous potential, and it's kept us busy for a number of years already, and we suspect we'll be at this for some time. It's been really exciting.
It's amazing. And I'm assuming, I don't know, but I think you're California through and through.
Yeah, very, very much so. California. I was born and raised in I was actually born in Southern California, I guess, raised in Northern California though, and went to did my undergrad in Southern California at UCLA. And actually part of that is part of the story, honestly. I grew up in this, I didn't realize how insulated it was from a environmental, sustainability perspective. Grew up with a compost bin, as being like a standard, thing that's offered in the city. And actually in my household, we actually don't even use the compost bin municipally. We use it for our own mulch, which, my dad uses, he would use for his vegetable garden. And so if I had stayed in Northern California for college and also gotten into brewing beer and that, alternate reality, I probably would have never come up with the idea, because composting was such a part of just the way of doing things here. But in LA at the time, there was not composting available. And so I was actually physically taking, huge coolers, think of like a Gatorade cooler that you see on the sidelines of like a, NCAA, game, to make 5 gallons of beer that filled with grain, like 20, 30 pounds of grain, and just tipping it into the dumpster. And so I actually physically felt the experience of wasting food. And that was, it was a bit of a light bulb for this, because we, didn't have something better to do with it. And so, that's, being in California, kind of on both ends of that, it was a big part of the origin of this.
Yeah, the environment. That's what I was wondering about. And I was reading about experimental flour. Did we already cover that, or is something we should dive into a little bit?
Well, we haven't talked about experimental flour. What do you mean by that?
I was reading somewhere about experimental flour. Maybe I read wrong, but I thought it was like.
Well, it is a kind of a new flour. It may be experimental, and we had a lot of experiments to create it. But so we mill it into a powder that's like a flour. It doesn't have the same properties as a flour, but it's used often in baking and snacks, and desserts, and pasta. So it's I guess you could probably classify it as an experimental flour in that respect. It's definitely an alternative flour.
Flour 2.0. You made it better. And so, Daniel, what's really fascinating to me is, even though there is a consumer play with all this, but is your company primarily a B2B situation then?
Yeah. So we work with big companies, small companies, on helping them develop upcycled food products. Our vision is really to be, it's almost like an Intel Inside, model, if that makes some sense to you, around helping other companies create products powered by ReGrained. And the reason for that actually is pretty straightforward. From a mission perspective, like, our goal is to help support a food system that can do more with less. We're here to promote a more circular food economy. We do that through upcycled food. If we were to sell $100 million a year of our own consumer products, that would be considered a great success in the CPG world. Companies get acquired for a lot of money for doing less sales. But from a mission perspective, we'd only work with a handful of breweries, best case, even at that level of sales. So for us, it's really a lot more exciting to become an integral component of another company's products and work with a wide range of companies, from founder-led startups all the way through to multinational conglomerates, on taking this ingredient and bringing it to market through their own products. And we can really have a much bigger impact that way, first with the brewer's grain, and then looking at some of our next products will be made from like the oat milk byproduct, and other alternative dairy and juices. And there's really like a lot that can be done, and we can do it bigger and better together.
That's fascinating. To really, like, the possibilities for you all are endless, because someone comes to you, they want to work together, you help them think about it, you help them innovate it, you help them power it, and then what you put out is basically like a collaboration.
That's right. And we just had one launch just had one launch last week with a company called Dope. They do an edible and bakeable cookie dough. It's a good example of this partnership model that's very recent. It's a great tasting product. They were able to achieve with this. It's called Beast Mode Brownie. It's like a brownie flavored cookie dough. And with this particular product, they were able to get 6 times the fiber of their normal doughs, twice the protein, and then also have a sustainability story around it. And so, if you can go to their website and you can kind of check out that product, and it's it's a way for our partners to create innovations that have some better differences around both environmental and personal health.
I love that, better differences. That's really, really an awesome phrase. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, I'm definitely upcycling that from someone else who said something similar to me at some point.
Better differences, man. Listen, I just need some better differences, okay?
Yeah, well, work with ReGrained. That's we can we can help unlock that.
And really, like, I'm leading into social media here, but I mean, really, like, part of your journey and learning and inventing some of these things and proliferating them has led you to found an association around it all. And tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Upcycled Food Association, and then its sister organization is called the Upcycled Food Foundation, was founded by, there's I believe eight of us originally. There's now over 150 members. There's representation from academics. Drexel University is one of the founding partners, and brands like ReGrained and Barnana and Renewal Mill and Imperfect Foods. And there's we came together and decided to start the association is for businesses. So it's for, we noticed that there's more and more happening in the upcycled food space. We really wanted to create a center of gravity, for that movement, a place to really standardize, a few things and grow in a more coordinated way. And so for the first step, besides, setting up the organization and signing up some members, was to formally define upcycled foods for, the first time, which, happens. And this is, by the way, we're about a year and a half into this organization. So we got over 150 members, including some big companies like Dole and Mondelez, joining and just under, 18 months of even operating.
That's phenomenal.
Formally defined upcycled foods. And then the next step from there was actually developing a certification standard. And so there was a committee that was put forth with, some really expert, third parties to the association, these people who have developed like non-GMO and organic certifications, right? Represent stakeholders from academics, from the private sector. It ended up being about a 7-month process to develop a certification standard for upcycled food. That standard has now been adopted and released publicly. You can find it at upcycledfood.org. And there's a beta program happening right now for the certification body. We're to actually go through the certification process and work out any kinks before fully rolling it out to the public this summer. And so within a few months here, you should start seeing products that aren't just claiming to be upcycled food, but actually having a certification around it. And so that's I'm not an operator of that organization. I'm a founder. I'm a board officer. But the association is doing some great work around really coordinating the movement that we helped start.
And I know we in our earlier conversation talked about doing coalition building. How does some of that work? And are you using LinkedIn for some of that?
Yeah. So from like a social media perspective, LinkedIn is definitely a very active place for these founders to come to come together. There's been some also just coordinated like marketing campaign. Like this is just a small example, but shows the type of collaboration that's happening on like a more of a marketing front. There's a number of our brands that are sold currently on Thrive Market, right? Great online retailer. It's Earth Week's coming up. Together we're going to do some cross promotion of our products, on the Thrive Market platform, as the upcycled food brands. Also within the association, there's some company, there's different kind of themes too. So there's like a number of companies that are focused on coffee fruit, as a good example, also known as Cascara. And those groups, I'm sure, compete in some respects, but also, benefit from being able to collaborate in a non-competitive, way, or a pre-competitive way. So, there's coffee fruit companies, there's other supply chains like cacao fruit, right, from chocolate making, things like that. We're doing webinars pretty regularly too. Like just yesterday, I was actually on one with a few of the other companies that have done equity crowdfunding, which is, kind of an intersection between marketing and capital raising too. And so it's, very much been the type of movement that has been, made uniquely possible in a lot of respects because of, social media tools and the ability to connect, virtually as an association, especially with, 2020 being our first full year of operation and a fully virtual, has everything's been fully virtual so far, which is, challenge in some respects, but also really flattens the universe, so to speak, I guess, the planet. Yeah.
It's a really interesting perspective, flattening it. Talk more about equity funding. I think that's fascinating. I think not enough people know about it.
Yeah, and it's something that we really are big on championing, and at ReGrained too. It's basically from a regulatory perspective, it only has been possible relatively recently. 2017 was when the law passed to allow what's called non-accredited investors, to think like everyday consumers, to be able to actually invest in private fundraisers for low minimums like $100, $200 to invest in companies. I'm not talking about Kickstarter and Indiegogo here. I'm talking about like actually owning a share of startup businesses that are previously very much only accessible to the elite few who can have high net worth and can write pretty large checks. This really democratizes venture capital in a really interesting way. One of the leading platforms is called WeFunder. We had a great experience with them for our second raise. We've done 2 equity crowdfunding raises as a part of our broader capital stack. I see it as strategic capital because it's a way to allow our customers, our community, to invest in our mission and own our mission with us and our success. And we definitely leverage that for marketing purposes too. After the first campaign, we did a rebrand at some point. As brands evolve, that's something that happens. And we had 700 people that were invested in our business that could act as a focus group of sorts, to test some of our positioning. When we do new product launches, like we just launched into a Kroger division with our snack puff, that was announced first and foremost to now we have over 1,000 investors from our second campaign. We've raised over $1.5 million, of our capital has come from like these micro angels, if you will. And so it's a really exciting new frontier. Actually, the laws just a few weeks ago just changed again, raising the limit for brands. They can now raise up to $5 million from equity crowdfunding.
That's really good news.
Yeah. So it's something that I definitely encourage other founders, especially kind of mission driven, mission led businesses, to look at as a source of strategic capital.
I mean, to me, the first thing when you said that is it's freedom in a way. You call it democratization. It's freedom, but it's also like the monetization of community. It's like if you have, because not everybody can, as you said, not everybody can afford, to make bigger investments. But if you've got a really engaged community around you, getting them to invest in your next mission or your next product is phenomenal. I'm so glad that you talked about that. And you talked about the expansion and distribution with Kroger. That's super awesome. I got to ask you this one. I know as entrepreneurs, we a lot of times don't know whether we're going in the right direction. We're seeking self-awareness and we want to learn more about what we can do better. But I know you've got some advice for food and beverage entrepreneurs. Like what advice do you have today, to people about what they're doing and how they should keep on?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that always comes top of mind for me when asked this question is to remember that like innovation is putting creativity in action, right? And that's like the actual action part is where a lot of people get caught up, in making the best laid kind of perfect plans. And, there's other kind of, adages or maybe even platitudes, if you want to be a little cynical about it, around like not letting, progress get in the way of, not letting perfection, get in the way of progress, things like that. People
I love that one.
Paralysis by analysis, right? There's a lot of things like that where people just get really like caught up in the planning phase and not actually taking action. And you learn so much more by just actually doing. And, as an entrepreneur, you're going to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? But it's not like a 2-dimensional thing where you're just going forwards and backwards. There's like a lot of different directions that you're growing your business, and the sure way to make sure that you're not making any progress is to not do anything, right? So like actually just taking action on ideas and getting products launched, and that's an ideas off the ground, especially if they're good for the world. That's something that I think is really important. Also, just on a personal level, like not burning out, I think is really key. There's this like romantic myth of the entrepreneur who, burns the midnight oil and, is just always on, always going. And, that's something that is, it's very much romanticized more so than it is, reality. And I think, I've seen a lot of founders, burn themselves out. And, you're like, when you're a founder, your emotional capital, your passion is really like a huge part of what moves everything forward. And so I just think it's like really important to have balance and to build balance into what you're doing. And because you're gonna be working your butt off no matter what, right? And to make sure that you kind of create space for yourself to be creative and have ideas. A lot of times that happens when you're not staring at the blue light of a computer screen all day, right? So I think that's really key too.
I think that's amazing advice about seeking space, whether it's a bike ride or a kayak journey, just being able to think. I think some of our best ideas come to us in those spaces. I love the idea of emotional capital of a founder being critical on the more, I guess, whatever side you want to call it. I always think about Mike Tyson's phrase, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
yeah, that's a good one.
I think that sometimes when you get punched in the face, or when the dimension of our growth isn't where we planned it. It's like that bike ride, or spending time with your girlfriend or your kid or your mom, or just doing something meaningful becomes so important. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. How can people find you and ReGrained?
Yeah, for better or worse, I'm extremely easy to find. As you were saying, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Love connecting, especially with with other founders and other just leaders of there's entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, right? My email's all over the web, so I may as well just share it. I'm just dan@regrained.com. On social media, we're at ReGrained. We love doing what we do in community, with others, in partnership. So, if you're an another brand, whether or not you're focused on upcycling today and want to learn, more about it, would love to connect, would love to see opportunities for product development too. Like if from a product application standpoint, if you could name it, we've probably ReGrained it, right? In every aisle of the grocery store, there's opportunity. And, would love to hear from you. And also just for earlier stage founders who want to learn more about equity crowdfunding, that's something that we also, are big believers in here, and happy to connect you with some resources. We worked with Chloe Servino, a writer for Forbes, actually recently on putting together some advice for founders that are looking to learn more about equity crowdfunding. And so if you kind of look up ReGrained and I don't know, maybe the keyword like Forbes and equity crowdfunding, you should be able to find that. But yeah, we'd really love to hear from people. It's one of the best parts about doing this.
Daniel, thank you so much for everything you've done for people and with your company, and for being on this podcast today. Really appreciate it. Love the fact that you said this is one of the things that drives you is not only a mission, but for community. So thank you sincerely for being who you are. And with that, we'll end this podcast. I'm Duncan, your co-host with Firebelly. We make brands more likable and profitable through social media. If you'd like to learn more about us, hello@firebellymarketing.com. This has been the Firebelly Social Show. We'll see you on the other side.
Thanks for listening to the Firebelly Social Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.